Some stories find us when we need them most. This is a tale of homecoming not just to a place, but to the person we were always meant to become. It speaks to those who have carried regrets across the years, who have wondered if second chances exist outside of dreams. Set in the American West of the 1880s, it follows a man returning to settle his father's land, only to discover that what he left behind never truly let him go. For those of us who understand that some journeys take a lifetime to complete, and that the heart remembers what the mind tries to forget, this story is for you. May it bring you comfort, as all good stories should. The letter had been simple. 4 lines. His father was dead. The ranch was his. Come home. Caleb Thornton folded the telegram and slid it into his coat pocket, where it had stayed for 3 weeks now, the paper softening at the edges from his fingers, finding it again and again. Dusty Creek, Colorado. 12 years since he had seen it. 12 years since he had walked out the front door with nothing but a saddle and a grudge. Now he sat on his horse at the top of Miller's Ridge. Looking down at the valley below, the town had shrunk. Or maybe he had just seen too many towns since then, each one blurring into the next until they all looked the same general store, the same saloon, the same church steeple pointing toward a sky that never answered. Dusty Creek was no different. A main street, a handful of buildings, smoke rising from chimneys in the October afternoon. And there, at the edge of town where the land opened up into rolling pastures, the Thornton Ranch. His horse shifted beneath him, tail swatting at flies. Easy. Whiskey. The animal snorted, as if to say, "You are the one who needs to settle down." Caleb pulled his hat lower against the sun. The brim was worn thin, where his fingers always grabbed it, a habit he had picked up somewhere in Kansas, or maybe New Mexico. He could not remember anymore. The years had a way of melting together when you spent them moving. He clicked his tongue and started down the ridge. The town noticed him before he was ready to be noticed. A woman sweeping the porch of the boarding house paused mid-stroke. 2 men outside the blacksmith's shop stopped their conversation. A child pointed from across the street before his mother pulled his hand down and hurried him along. Caleb kept his eyes forward. He knew what they saw. A stranger on a tired horse, dust coating his shoulders like a second skin. They did not recognize him yet. 12 years was a long time. He had been 26 when he left, lean and angry and certain he knew everything worth knowing. Now he was 38, with gray at his temples and a stillness in his movements that came from learning he knew nothing at all. The law office sat at the end of Main Street, squeezed between the bank and a dry goods store. The sign above the door read, J. Harmon, Attorney at Law, in faded gold letters. Caleb dismounted and looped Whiskey's reins around the hitching post. The door creaked when he pushed it open. Inside, the room smelled of old paper and pipe tobacco. Shelves lined the walls, stuffed with leather-bound volumes and stacks of documents tied with string. Behind a desk cluttered with more paper sat a man in his 60s, spectacles perched on the end of his nose, white hair combed back from a weathered face. Jacob Harmon looked up. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Harmon removed his spectacles and set them carefully on the desk. He studied Caleb the way a man studies a horse he is thinking of buying, looking for weaknesses, for tells. Caleb Thornton, he said finally, not a question. Mr. Harmon, you look like him. Your father, the way he stood in doorways, like he was not sure if he wanted to come in or turn around and leave. Caleb said nothing. Harmon gestured to a chair. Sit down. We have business to discuss. The office was quiet, except for the scratch of Harmon's pen as he made notes on a pad of paper. Outside, A wagon rolled past, its wheels creaking against the packed dirt of the street. "Your father left everything to you," Harmon said without looking up. "The ranch, the livestock, the land, all 640 acres of it." He paused. "He also left debts. Not many, but they exist. And he left questions." Caleb shifted in his chair. "What kind of questions?" Harmon set down his pen and finally met Caleb's eyes. "A man came to see me 2 weeks ago. Well-dressed. City type. Said he represented a mining company out of Denver. He wanted to buy your father's land. Made a generous offer. More than generous. I would say, suspiciously so." "Did my father agree to sell?" "No." Harmon's voice was flat. "He refused. Quite firmly. And then, 3 days later, he was dead." The words hung in the air between them. Caleb's hand found the telegram in his pocket. The letter said he passed in his sleep. He did. The doctor confirmed it. Heart gave out. Your father had been ill for months. But the timing... Harmon shook his head slowly. "The timing bothers me." "Who is this man, the one from Denver?" "Called himself Silas Crane. Charming fellow? Too charming, if you ask me. The kind of man who smiles while he is counting your teeth." Harmon reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small brass key. "Your father left this with me. Said to give it to you when you came. Only you." Caleb took the key. It was old, the brass tarnished with age. Small enough to fit in his palm. "What does it open?" He did not say. "But I imagine you will find out." Harmon stood, signaling the end of the meeting. "One more thing, Caleb, before you go." Caleb paused at the door. "Your father talked about you. More than you might think." The old lawyer's voice softened. "He was a hard man. I know that better than most. But he kept track of you all those years, knew where you were working, what trails you were riding. He never said it in so many words. But..." Harmon hesitated. "He was proud of you, in his way." Caleb's jaw tightened. His way was not good enough. He walked out before Harmon could respond. The ranch was exactly as he remembered it, and nothing like he remembered it at all. The gate still bore the name Thornton Ranch, but the letters had faded, and the crossbar hung crooked on its hinges. The path leading up to the main house was overgrown with weeds. The barn needed paint. The fences sagged in places where posts had rotted through, but the bones were still there. The shape of the place his grandfather had built with his own hands. The place his father had inherited and expanded. The place Caleb had spent the first 26 years of his life. He dismounted at the front porch and stood there, one hand on Whiskey's neck. The house was 2 stories, built from local timber and stone. Wide windows faced south to catch the winter sun. A covered porch wrapped around 3 sides, and a rocking chair sat empty near the door, the same chair his father had always occupied in the evenings, watching the sun go down with a pipe in his hand and silence on his tongue. Caleb climbed the porch steps. They groaned under his weight. The door was unlocked. Inside, the air was thick with dust motes floating in the afternoon light. The parlor looked the same as it always had, the same horsehair sofa, the same faded rug, the same stone fireplace with the mantel his mother had polished every Sunday before she died. Everything was covered in a thin layer of neglect. But nothing had been touched. It was as if time had simply stopped. No, not stopped. Waiting. Caleb walked through the room slowly, relearning the geography of his childhood. The kitchen with its cast-iron stove. The dining room with the long oak table that had seated a dozen ranch hands in the good years. The narrow stairs leading up to the bedrooms he had not seen since the day he left. He did not go upstairs. Not yet. Instead, he went to his father's study. The room was small and cluttered, lined with shelves of ledgers and almanacs, and a few novels his father had pretended not to read. A desk sat beneath the window, its surface covered with papers, receipts, bills, letters from suppliers, a lamp with a cracked chimney, a pen stand with dried ink in the well. Caleb stood in the doorway for a long moment. Then he saw it. A wooden box, tucked in the corner of the bottom drawer where it had always been kept, small, made of oak, brass hinges. The key in his pocket felt suddenly heavy. He crossed the room and pulled the box from its hiding place. The wood was worn smooth from years of handling, though Caleb had never been allowed to touch it. Private, his father had always said. None of your concern. The key fit perfectly. Inside Barin, there were letters, dozens of them, maybe more than 30, all addressed in his father's careful hand to Caleb. None of them had ever been sent. He did not know how long he sat there, reading. The light shifted from afternoon gold to evening amber. The house grew cold as the sun dropped behind the mountains. Still, Caleb sat at his father's desk, the letters spread before him, each one a window into a mind he had never known. Son, I heard you made it to Kansas. Good cattle country, they say. They say? I hope you are well. I do not know how to write to you. I never learned to say the things that matter. Your mother was better at that. After she passed, the words just stopped. Maybe someday I will send this. Maybe not. Your father and another. Dated 2 years later, Caleb. A man came through town today. Said he had worked with you on a drive near Wichita. Said you had saved a calf from a flooded creek. Risked your neck for an animal worth less than your boots. Fool thing to do, he said. But brave. That sounds like you. I should have told you more often. You were always brave. Even when you stood up to me. Even when you were wrong, you were brave. And another. From just 6 months ago, son. Clara Dawson stopped by today with a pot of soup. She has been helping me since I took ill. She is a good woman. Better than I deserve. For certain. She asked about you. I told her what little I know. I think she still cares for you. After all this time, after everything, I do not know what went wrong between the two of you. I suspect I had something to do with it. I suspect I had something to do with a lot of things. If you ever come home, talk to her, listen to her. Do not make my mistakes. Your father, Caleb's hands were trembling. He set the letters down and pressed his palms flat against the desk, breathing slowly, trying to steady himself. 12 years. For 12 years. He had carried the weight of his father's silence like a stone in his chest. He had told himself it did not matter. He had told himself he was better off alone, that some wounds were too deep to heal, that the past was dead and buried. But here was the truth, spread out before him in faded ink and yellowing paper. His father had not forgotten him. His father had not stopped caring. His father had simply never learned how to say it. It was nearly dark when Caleb finally rose from the desk. He walked to the window and looked out across the land, his land now, though it did not feel like his. The pastures rolled away into shadow, and beyond them, the mountains stood black against a sky turning purple with twilight. To the east, a light flickered. Caleb squinted. It came from the neighboring property, the Dawson place. A single lamp burning in a window, yellow and warm against the gathering night. Clara. He had not let himself think her name since he crossed the county line. But now it was there, unavoidable. Like the ache in a joint that predicted rain. Clara Dawson. Clara Dawson. Who had been 24 years old the last time he saw her, standing at this very gate with tears in her eyes and anger in her voice. Clara Dawson, who had married Matthew Dawson 6 months after Caleb left a good man. Everyone said, a steady man. Though Caleb had never asked and never wanted to know, Clara Dawson, who was a widow now, the light in her window flickered once, twice, then it went out. If this story speaks to your heart, I would be honored to know where you are reading from tonight and perhaps what road, long or short, brought you here. Sleep did not come easy that first night. Caleb lay on the old horsehair mattress in the room that had once been his, staring at the ceiling beams he had memorized as a boy. The house creaked and settled around him, speaking in a language he had forgotten, the groan of timber cooling in the night air, the scratch of a branch against the window, the distant call of a coyote somewhere in the hills. The letters sat on the nightstand beside him. He had not been able to leave them in the study. When the first gray light of dawn touched the window, he was already dressed and outside, walking the property line. The ranch was larger than he remembered, 640 acres of pasture and timber, stretching from the creek bed in the south to the rocky foothills in the north. The cattle, what remained of them, grazed in the lower meadow. Maybe 60 head where there had once been 200. Someone had been caring for them. Someone had kept the water troughs filled and the worst of the fence breaks mended. Caleb followed the eastern fence line, where the Thornton land met the Dawson property. He heard her before he saw her. The sharp ring of a hammer on iron. Steady. Rhythmic. Coming from just beyond the rise. He stopped walking. For a moment, he considered turning back, going the other way, finding something else that needed his attention, and there was plenty that did. But his boots kept moving forward, carrying him up the slope and over the crest of the hill. Clara stood at the fence line, her back to him. She wore a brown work dress, faded almost gray from washing, a canvas apron tied at her waist, and leather gloves that had seen better years. Her hair was pinned up beneath a wide-brimmed hat, loose strands escaping at the neck. She was driving a nail into a fence post with efficient, practiced strokes. Caleb's footsteps crunched on the dry grass. Clara did not turn around. "I was wondering when you would come this way," she said. Her voice was calm, measured. She drove another nail. "Saw you ride in yesterday. Figured you would walk the fence line sooner or later." "Clara." She finished the nail before she turned. 12 years. Her face was thinner than he remembered. The soft curves of youth replaced by sharper lines, cheekbones more prominent, jaw more defined. There were fine lines at the corners of her eyes that had not been there before, the kind that came from squinting into the sun, or from laughing, or from crying. Maybe all three. But her eyes were the same, gray-green, like the sage that grew along the creek bed. Steady, watchful, giving nothing away. "Caleb?" She said his name like it was a fact, nothing more. "You look tired. Long ride." "From where? New Mexico? Before that? Texas?" She nodded once, as if this confirmed something she had already suspected. Then she turned back to the fence and picked up another nail from the pouch at her belt. Your father's cattle wandered through here last spring. Fence was down in 3 places. I mended what I could, but the posts are rotten clear through. They need replacing. I noticed. I've been keeping an eye on things. Someone had to. The words landed harder than she probably intended, or maybe exactly as hard as she intended. With Clara, it had always been difficult to tell. Caleb moved closer, stopping a few feet away, close enough to see the calluses on her hands, the dirt beneath her fingernails, the way she held herself straight-backed and solid, like a woman who had learned to carry her own weight. Thank you, he said, for looking after the place, for looking after him. Clara paused mid-swing. She did not look at him. He was my neighbor, and he was... She hesitated. He was a good man. In his way. Difficult. Stubborn as a mule in mud, but good. I did not know he was sick. Would you have come if you had... The question hung between them like smoke. Caleb did not answer. He was not sure he knew the answer himself. Clara drove the nail home with 2 hard strokes. Then she straightened and finally turned to face him fully, pushing the brim of her hat back with one gloved hand. Your father left some things in the study. Papers. I did not touch them, was not my place. But he told me, near the end, that there were things you needed to see, things you needed to understand. I found the letters. Something shifted in her expression. A flicker. There and gone. Did you read them? Some. Enough. Clara was quiet for a moment. Her eyes searched his face, looking for something he did not know what. Then she nodded slowly and turned back to her work. There is more than letters in that house. Caleb, your father kept secrets from everyone, including me. She picked up another nail. Including you. What kind of secrets? She did not answer right away. The hammer rose and fell, rose and fell. A man came to see him 2-3 months before he passed. City man? Nice suit? Nice smile? Your father sent him away angry. I never saw Marcus Thornton shout like that, not once in all the years I knew him. But that day, she shook her head. That day, he was afraid. Caleb felt something cold settle in his stomach. Silas Crane. Clara looked at him sharply. You know him. The lawyer mentioned him. Said he wanted to buy the land. He wants more than the land. Clara set down her hammer and pulled off her gloves, one finger at a time. He has been buying up properties all through this valley. The Hendersons sold to him last spring, the Fosters the year before. He is circling this place like a buzzard waiting for something to die. Why, what is so special about this valley? Clara met his eyes. That is the question. Is it not? She gathered her tools and dropped them into a canvas bag at her feet. When she straightened, her face was unreadable, again closed off, careful. I have work to do. So do you. I reckon. She started to walk away, then paused and looked back over her shoulder. Come by the house this evening. I have something to show you. Something your father gave me to keep safe. What is it? Clara's jaw tightened. A map and a letter addressed to someone I have never heard of. She turned and walked away before he could ask anything else. Caleb stood at the fence line, watching her figure grow smaller against the morning sky. The cold feeling in his stomach had spread to his chest now, settling there like a stone. His father had been afraid. Marcus Thornton the hardest, most unyielding man Caleb had ever known had been afraid. And somewhere in that house, hidden among the papers and the dust and the memories, there was a secret worth killing for. The day passed slowly. Caleb spent it walking the property, cataloging what needed repair and what could wait. The barn roof leaked in 2 places. The chicken coop had collapsed entirely. No chickens left to house anyway. The well pump worked, but the handle was loose and would need tightening before winter. The cattle looked healthy enough, their coats thick and glossy, though they scattered when he approached, unaccustomed to human presence beyond Clara's occasional checks. Everywhere he looked, he saw his father's absence. The vegetable garden, once his mother's pride, had gone to seed and weeds. The woodpile beside the back door held only a few split logs, not nearly enough for the cold months ahead. Inside the house, dishes sat unwashed in the kitchen basin, and a thin layer of dust covered every surface. His father had been dying alone, slowly, quietly, without sending word. By late afternoon, Caleb found himself back in the study. He sat at his father's desk and spread the letters out before him, arranging them by date. The earliest was from 8 years ago, shortly after Caleb had left Kansas for the territories. The most recent was dated just 6 weeks before Marcus Thornton's death. Between them lay a decade of silence made visible. His father had written about the weather, the cattle, the price of feed. He had written about neighbors who had moved away and new families who had arrived. He had written about Clara, her strength after Matthew's passing, her kindness during his illness, the way she reminded him of Caleb's mother sometimes. But scattered among these ordinary observations were darker threads. A man came asking about the north pasture again. 3rd time this year. I told him the same as before, not for sale, not now, not ever. He smiled and said he understood, but his eyes said something different, and later found survey markers on the ridge this morning. Someone has been measuring my land without permission. I pulled them up and burned them. Let them try again. And later still, Clara tells me I am being paranoid. Maybe she is right. But I have lived in this valley for 63 years, and I know when something is wrong. The water tastes different. The cattle will not graze near the creek bed anymore. Something is happening beneath this ground, and someone knows what it is. Caleb read this passage twice. The water tastes different. He pushed back from the desk and walked to the kitchen. A tin cup hung from a nail beside the pump. He filled it and raised it to his lips. The water was cold, clear. It tasted like water. But his father had not been a man given to flights of fancy. If Marcus Thornton said something was wrong with the water, something was wrong with the water. Caleb set down the cup and looked out the window toward the creek that ran along the southern edge of the property. The cattle were grazing in the upper meadow, well away from the water's edge. He filed this away and returned to the study. The key Harmon had given him still sat on the desk where he had left it. The wooden box was empty now. The letters spread across the surface. But as Caleb gathered the papers to put them back, his hand brushed against something at the bottom of the box. A false bottom. He ran his fingers along the edges, feeling for a seam. There, a small notch, barely visible. He pressed it, and the bottom panel lifted free. Beneath it lay a single sheet of paper. Folded once, Caleb unfolded it carefully. It was a map, hand-drawn, in his father's precise script. It showed the Thornton property and the surrounding lands, the Dawson place to the east, the Henderson and Foster properties to the north and west. But there were markings on it that Caleb did not understand. Symbols, numbers, lines connecting one point to another in a pattern that looked almost like a spider's web. At the center of the web, circled 3 times in red ink, was a spot on the north ridge. Beneath the map, written in a different hand smaller, more hurried, were 2 words silver vein. Caleb stared at the paper. Silver. That was why Crane wanted the land. That was why he had been buying up properties throughout the valley. Why he had pressured Clara. Why he had visited Marcus Thornton and left him shaking with anger. There was silver beneath this ground, and someone had known about it for a long time. But who had written those 2 words? The handwriting was not his father's. It was not anyone's he recognized. He turned the map over. On the back, in the same hurried script, was an address: Thomas Riley, Denver Territorial Assay Office, 1847 Larimer Street. Caleb had never heard the name before. The sun was touching the western mountains when he finally left the house. Clara's place sat about half a mile to the east, a modest homestead with a whitewashed farmhouse and a barn painted red. Smoke rose from the chimney, and a lamp glowed in the front window. As Caleb approached, he could smell something cooking: bread, maybe, or biscuits, and his stomach reminded him that he had not eaten since morning. He tied whiskey to the fence post and walked up the path to the door. Clara opened it before he could knock. She had changed out of her work clothes into a simple dress of dark blue cotton, her hair still pinned up but neater now, a few strands framing her face. Behind her, the house was small but clean, a kitchen visible through one doorway, a sitting room through another. "You are punctual," she said. "That is new." "Folks change, I reckon." "Do they?" She stepped aside to let him enter. "I suppose we will find out." The kitchen table was already set with 2 plates, 2 cups, a pot of coffee, and a basket of biscuits covered with a cloth. Clara gestured for him to sit. "I was not sure you would come," she said, pouring the coffee. "You said you had something to show me." "I do." She set down the pot and reached into the pocket of her apron, withdrawing a small envelope, yellowed with age. "Your father gave this to me last spring. Told me to keep it safe, and to give it to you if anything happened to him." Caleb took the envelope. It was sealed with wax, unmarked. "Did he say what it was?" "No, and I did not ask." Clara sat down across from him, her hands wrapped around her own cup. But he was different after that, quieter, like a man who had made a decision and was waiting to see if it was the right one. Caleb broke the seal and pulled out the letter inside. The handwriting was his father's, but shaky, written by a hand that trembled with illness or age, or both. "Son, if you are reading this, I am gone and you are home. I hope you can forgive an old man his foolishness. There is silver on this land, a vein that runs from our north ridge clear through to the Foster property and beyond. I discovered it 20 years ago, when you were still a boy. I told no one except one man, a friend. I thought, Thomas Riley. He was an assayer in Denver, and I trusted him to keep my secret. I was wrong to trust him. Riley sold the information to a mining company. They have been trying to buy this land ever since. First through offers, then through pressure, now through a man named Crane who works for interests I do not fully understand. I have protected this secret for 20 years because I knew what would happen if it got out. They would tear this valley apart, destroy everything your grandfather built, everything I have tried to preserve. But I am dying, and the secret dies with me unless you choose to carry it. The map shows everything. The letter with this one is addressed to Riley. I wrote it but never sent it. Maybe you will understand why when you read it. Whatever you decide, know this: the land is yours. The choice is yours. I will not reach out from the grave to tell you what to do. But if you stay, if you choose to fight, Clara will stand with you. She is stronger than she knows, stronger than I ever was. Trust her, Caleb, and maybe, in time, let her trust you again. Your father, Caleb, lowered the letter across the table. Clara watched him with those steady gray-green eyes. What does it say? He opened his mouth to answer and stopped. Through the window behind Clara, he could see the road leading up to her house. A carriage was coming, black, polished, pulled by two matching bay horses, and sitting in the driver's seat, his face illuminated by the last light of the setting sun, was a man in a city suit with a smile that did not reach his eyes. Clara followed his gaze to the window. Her face went still, not afraid something harder than that. She set down her coffee cup with a soft click against the saucer. "Stay here," she said. "Clara, stay here." She was already moving toward the door, her hand brushing against a shotgun that leaned in the corner. She did not pick it up. "Let me handle this." Caleb folded the letter and slipped it into his coat pocket alongside the map. Through the window, he watched Crane's carriage roll to a stop at the gate. The man stepped down with the ease of someone who owned every piece of ground he walked on. Silas Crane was tall and lean, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most ranchers made in a season. His hair was slicked back from a narrow face, and his smile, even from this distance, looked painted on. Clara stepped onto the porch. "Mrs. Dawson?" Crane removed his hat and held it against his chest. "Forgive the intrusion. I was passing by and thought I might pay my respects." "You were not passing by, Mr. Crane. There is nothing to pass by on this road except my property and the Thornton place." "Quite right. Quite right." His smile did not falter. "I heard the young Mr. Thornton has returned. I thought perhaps I might introduce myself." "He is not here." Caleb moved away from the window, pressing his back against the wall where he could listen without being seen. "Is that so?" Crane's voice carried easily in the evening air. "His horse seems to suggest otherwise. Fine animal. A bit road-worn, perhaps, but solid. The kind of horse a man rides when he has been traveling a long way." Silence. Caleb could picture Clara standing on that porch, arms crossed, chin lifted. He had seen that posture before 12 years ago, when she had stood between him and his father during their last argument. "Mr. Thornton is a private man," Clara said. "If you have business with him, I reckon you should visit during daylight hours, at his own property." "Of course, of course." Crane's tone remained pleasant, but something beneath it shifted, a blade sliding free of its sheath. "I mean no offense, Mrs. Dawson. I simply wanted to express my condolences. Marcus Thornton was a formidable man. The valley will not be the same without him." "No, it will not. And now his son inherits, a son who has been absent for how long? 12 years. I believe a long time to be away from home, a long time to be away from the land." "Get to your point, Mr. Crane." "My point is simple." The pleasant tone hardened slightly. "Running a ranch is difficult work. It requires knowledge, experience, commitment. A man who has been drifting for 12 years may find himself overwhelmed. I would hate to see the Thornton legacy crumble simply because pride prevented its heir from accepting a reasonable offer. And you are making such an offer. I am prepared to make a very generous offer, more than generous, enough for Mr. Thornton to start fresh somewhere else. somewhere better suited to his wandering nature. Clara's voice was flat. I will pass along your message. Please do. Crane replaced his hat. And Mrs. Dawson, the same offer extends to you. This valley is changing. The old ways are giving way to progress. Those who adapt will prosper. Those who resist. He let the sentence hang. Well, I am sure you understand. Footsteps on gravel. The creak of carriage springs. The snap of reins and the clatter of hooves retreating down the road. Caleb waited until the sound faded before stepping onto the porch. Clara stood at the railing, her hands gripping the wood so hard her knuckles had gone white. She did not turn when he came up beside her. He knows you were here, she said. I gathered. He wanted you to hear that. Every word of it. She released the railing and flexed her fingers. He is not just trying to buy land, Caleb. He is trying to scare us into selling, make us think we have no choice. Do we? Clara looked at him then. Her eyes were fierce in the fading light. Your father spent 20 years protecting this valley from men like Crane. He could have sold, could have taken the money, and lived out his days in comfort. But he stayed. He fought. Her voice caught slightly. He died still fighting. Caleb pulled the letter from his pocket. He knew about the silver. He knew all along. Silver. Clara's brow furrowed. What silver? He handed her the letter. She read it in silence, her expression shifting from confusion to understanding to something that looked like grief. When she finished, she folded the paper carefully and handed it back. 20 years, she said quietly. He kept this secret for 20 years. And now Crane wants it. All of it. The Thornton land, your land, that everything in between. The Henderson place, the Foster property. Clara's jaw tightened. He has already bought them. If the silver vein runs where your father said it does, then Crane is building a mining empire, piece by piece. They stood in silence as the last light drained from the sky. The first stars appeared above the mountains, sharp and cold. What are you going to do? Clara asked. Caleb stared out at the darkness. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called a long, mournful sound that seemed to echo off the hills. My father wrote about a man named Thomas Riley, an assayer in Denver, the one who sold his secret. You think Riley knows something? I think Riley knows everything. Where the silver is, how much it is worth, who else is involved. Caleb turned to face her. I need to find him. Denver is a long ride. 3 days, maybe 4. Clara was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded slowly. Go, find out what you can. And she met his eyes. But come back, Caleb. Do not disappear for another 12 years. I am not running this time. Words. Her voice was soft but steady. Words are easy. Actions are what matter. He wanted to argue. Wanted to tell her that he had changed. That the man who had walked away 12 years ago no longer existed. But the words stuck in his throat because he was not sure they were true. I will be back within a week, he said instead. I will hold you to that. She walked him to his horse. The night air was cold now, carrying the smell of wood smoke and dry grass and the faint mineral tang of the creek. Caleb gathered Whiskey's reins but did not mount. Clara, she waited. Why did you marry him, Matthew? I mean, the question came out before he could stop it. He had not meant to ask, not now, not like this. But it had been sitting in his chest for 12 years, and he was tired of carrying it. Clara's face was unreadable in the darkness. Because you left, she said simply. And because he asked, did you love him? I tried to. She paused. He was a good man, kind, steady. He deserved better than a wife who was always looking down the road, waiting for someone who was never going to come back. Caleb felt something twist in his gut. I am sorry. Do not be sorry. Be better. She reached out and touched Whiskey's neck, her hand pale against the dark coat. Matthew taught me something important. He taught me that love ain't just a feeling, it is a choice you make every day. You show up. You stay. You do the work, even when it is hard. She looked up at him. That is what matters. Not the leaving. The staying. Caleb mounted his horse. The saddle creaked beneath his weight. 1 week, he said. 1 week. He turned Whiskey toward the road and rode into the darkness. The Thornton house was cold when he returned. Caleb built a fire in the study and sat at his father's desk, spreading out the map and the letters and everything else he had found. The flames crackled and popped, throwing dancing shadows across the walls. He studied the map again, tracing the lines with his finger. The silver vein, if his father's markings were accurate, ran in a rough diagonal from the north ridge of the Thornton property, through the Foster land, and into the foothills beyond. The Henderson place sat at the western edge. The Dawson place at the eastern. If someone wanted to control the entire vein, they would need all of it. But that was not what caught his attention now. It was the symbol his father had drawn at the very edge of the map, almost hidden in the corner, a small mark, easily overlooked. A cross inside a circle. Caleb had seen that symbol before. Not here. Not in Dusty Creek. He had seen it carved into a wooden beam in a mining camp in New Mexico. 3 years ago. The camp had been abandoned, its inhabitants long gone. But there had been bodies there too, 3 men, buried in shallow graves behind the main building. The local sheriff had called it a claim dispute gone wrong. But the old-timers in the nearby town had whispered a different name. The Syndicate. Caleb stared at the symbol, a chill running down his spine despite the fire's warmth. If the Syndicate was involved, if Crane was working for them, then this was not just about silver. This was about something much darker. And his father had known. His father had been fighting them alone. For 20 years. With no one to help him. Until now. Caleb folded the map and slipped it into his coat. He would leave for Denver at first light. But before he went, there was one more thing he needed to do. He crossed the room to the fireplace and knelt beside it, running his fingers along the stones. His father had shown him this hiding place once, when Caleb was just a boy, a loose stone near the base, barely noticeable unless you knew where to look. He found it and pried it free. Behind it was a small leather pouch, heavy with coins gold by the weight of it, emergency money, set aside for the worst days. But there was something else too, a small notebook, bound in cracked leather. Its pages yellowed with age. Caleb opened it to the first page and felt his breath catch in his throat. The handwriting was not his father's, it was his mother's. His mother had been dead for 23 years. Caleb held the notebook in his hands, feeling the cracked leather beneath his fingers. The pages were brittle with age. The ink faded to a pale brown, but the handwriting was unmistakable. The same elegant script that had labeled jars in the kitchen, written shopping lists, signed his childhood birthday cards. Eleanor Thornton had died when Caleb was 15, a fever that swept through the valley one autumn, taking her and a dozen others before the first snow fell. He remembered the funeral, the black dresses, the white faces, his father standing rigid as a fence post while the preacher spoke words that meant nothing. After that, Marcus Thornton had stopped speaking about her entirely. Her photographs were put away. Her belongings were packed into trunks and stored in the attic. Her name became something that hung in the air, unspoken, like the smell of rain before a storm. And now, here was her voice, preserved in faded ink. Caleb opened the notebook and began to read. The first entries were ordinary household accounts, recipes, notes about the garden. His mother had been a practical woman, more concerned with the daily business of running a ranch than with sentiment or philosophy. But as he turned the pages, the tone shifted. March 14th, 1859. Marcus came home late tonight, covered in mud and barely able to stand. He had been digging in the north pasture again the third time this month. When I asked what he was looking for, he would not say. But I saw it in his eyes. Fear. And something else. Something like hunger. March 22nd, 1859. He told me tonight about the silver. He found it weeks ago. A vein running deep beneath the ridge. He says it could make us rich beyond imagining. But there was no joy in his voice when he said it, only worry. I asked him what he planned to do. He said he did not know. He said he needed to think. April 3rd, 1859, a man came to the house today while Marcus was in town. He did not give his name, but he knew about the silver. He knew everything. He said there were people in Denver who would pay handsomely for the mineral rights. He said Marcus should consider their offer carefully. I asked how he knew about the discovery. He smiled and said nothing is secret in this world, only delayed. When Marcus came home, I told him what had happened. His face went white. He made me promise never to open the door to strangers again. April 17th, 1859. Marcus has decided he will not sell. He will not tell anyone else about the silver. He says the moment word gets out, this valley will be destroyed. Mining companies will come, and they will tear the land apart. Everything his father built, everything we have worked for, gone. I told him I supported his decision. I do. But I am afraid. There is something in the way he looks at the hills now. Something haunted. Caleb turned the pages faster, scanning the entries. His mother's handwriting grew more hurried as the months passed. The letters cramped and uneven. June 8th, 1859. Another stranger came today. 2 of them this time. They did not threaten us, not directly. But there was a coldness in their eyes that made my skin crawl. They said they represented investors from the East. They said the silver belonged to everyone, not just one family. They said Marcus was being selfish. Marcus told them to leave. They did, but slowly, taking their time, looking at everything. I have started keeping a rifle by the door. August 23rd, 1859. Marcus met with a man in Denver, an assayer named Riley. He needed to know how much the silver was worth. He said, needed to understand what we were protecting. Riley seemed trustworthy, Marcus said. A family man? Honest. I pray he is right. October 1st, 1859. Riley has betrayed us. Marcus learned yesterday that the assayer sold our secret to a group of investors. They call themselves the Syndicate. Marcus says they are dangerous, more dangerous than the ordinary mining companies. They do not just buy land, they take it. We are not safe here anymore. October 15th, 1859. Marcus has a plan. He has made copies of all the survey documents, the assay reports, everything. He is hiding them in different places, some here, some with trusted friends, some in locations only he knows. He says if anything happens to him, I must find the documents and take them to the authorities in Denver. He says the syndicate has bought some of the local law, but the territorial marshal is clean. I asked what he meant by, if anything happens. He did not answer. The entries stopped there. Caleb turned the page, but it was blank. The rest of the notebook was empty, page after page of nothing. His mother had died less than a month later. He sat back in his chair, the notebook resting in his lap. The fire had burned down to embers, casting the room in a dim orange glow. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows in their frames. All these years, he had thought he understood his family's story. His father had been cold and distant because that was simply who he was. His mother had died of fever, a tragedy with no deeper meaning. And Caleb himself had left because he could not bear to live under his father's silence any longer. But now the story was changing. His father had not been cold. He had been afraid. Afraid for his family. Afraid for his land. Afraid of enemies he could not fight in the open. And his mother Caleb's hands tightened on the notebook. Had his mother really died of fever? Or had the syndicate found a way to silence her? The thought was too terrible to hold. He pushed it aside, focusing on what he knew for certain. His father had hidden documents, copies of the survey, the assay reports, proof of the silver, and proof of the syndicate's crimes. Some were here, in the house. Some were with trusted friends, and some were in locations only Marcus Thornton had known. Caleb looked at the map again, at the symbols his father had drawn, the cross inside the circle, the syndicate's mark, and other marks too, scattered across the property, X's and dots and small squares that could mean anything, or could mean everything. He needed to find those documents. If the syndicate was still operating and Crane's presence suggested they were, then those papers were the only weapon he had. But first, he needed to understand what he was dealing with. Dawn came gray and cold. Caleb had not slept. He had spent the night reading and rereading his mother's journal, searching for clues he might have missed. Now he stood on the porch, watching the sun rise over the mountains, a cup of bitter coffee cooling in his hands. The road to Denver stretched north, winding through the foothills and into the high country beyond. 3 days of hard riding, maybe 4 if the weather turned. He had made the journey before, years ago, when he was young and angry and running from everything he knew. Now he was going back. Not running this time, but searching. He drained the last of his coffee and went inside to gather his things. The map, the letters, his mother's journal. He wrapped them in oilcloth and tucked them into his saddlebags, along with a change of clothes, a pouch of dried beef, and the gold coins from his father's hiding place. He checked his rifle, loaded his revolver, filled his canteen at the pump. By the time he finished, the sun was fully up. He led Whiskey out of the barn and mounted, settling into the saddle with the ease of long practice. The horse stamped and snorted, eager to move after a night in the stall. Easy, boy. Long ride ahead. He turned toward the road and stopped. Clara was coming up the path, her stride quick and purposeful. She wore her work clothes again, the brown dress and canvas apron. But there was something different in her face, something urgent. Caleb. She was slightly out of breath when she reached him. I was hoping to catch you before you left. What is wrong? The Henderson place. She paused, catching her breath. I rode by there this morning, early. Wanted to check on their old milk cow. Martha Henderson asked me to look after her when they sold. And there are men there, half a dozen, maybe more. They have set up camp in the barn, and they are not ranch hands. Clara's jaw tightened. They are carrying rifles. Caleb? New ones? The kind you see on soldiers, not farmers. Caleb felt his stomach drop. Did they see you? No, I stayed in the tree line. She looked up at him, her eyes sharp. Crane is not just buying land. He is building an army, and I reckon they are getting ready to move. Move where? Clara did not answer. She did not need to. The Thornton Ranch, the last piece of the puzzle, the land his father had protected for 20 years. And now Caleb was about to ride away, leaving it undefended. He looked down at Clara, then out at the road stretching north toward Denver. The documents were there, the proof he needed to expose the syndicate and protect the valley. But if Crane moved while he was gone, how long do you think we have? A few days? Maybe less? Clara reached up and put her hand on his boot. I can watch things here, but if they come in force, Caleb, if they come with those men and those rifles, there is nothing I can do alone. He made his decision. I will ride hard. 2 days to Denver, 1 day to find Riley, 2 days back, 5 days total. That is cutting it mighty close. I know. He gathered the reins. Keep your rifle loaded. Stay away from the Henderson place. And if Crane comes here, if he threatens you, do not fight. Tell him whatever he wants to hear. I will deal with him when I get back. And if you do not get back, the question hung in the air between them. Caleb leaned down and took her hand. Then take the documents to the territorial marshal in Denver. His name should be in my father's papers somewhere. Tell him everything. Clara's fingers tightened around his. Come back. Caleb? I will. He released her hand and spurred Whiskey forward. The road north swallowed him whole. He rode hard that first day, pushing Whiskey as fast as the terrain would allow. The landscape changed as he climbed open pastures giving way to dense pine forests, the air growing thinner and colder with each mile. By nightfall, he had reached the edge of the high country, where the trees thinned and the peaks rose stark and white against the darkening sky. He made camp in a sheltered hollow, building a small fire and eating his dried beef in silence. The stars emerged one by one, cold and distant, offering no comfort. Caleb pulled out his mother's journal and read the last entry again by firelight. Marcus has a plan. He has made copies of all the survey documents. Copies, hidden in different places. His father had spent 20 years protecting those documents, adding to them, moving them as circumstances changed. Some were in the house Caleb had found those. Some were with trusted friends. But who were those friends? His father had been a solitary man, slow to trust. The list of people Marcus Thornton would have confided in was mighty short. Harmon. Perhaps. The lawyer had known about the silver, or at least suspected. Clara. No, his father's letters made it clear he had never told her the full truth. Who else? Caleb closed the journal and stared into the flames. And then, like a stone, dropping into still water, a memory surfaced. His father, years ago, standing at the fence line with an old man Caleb did not recognize. They had been talking in low voices, their heads close together. When Caleb approached, they fell silent. The old man nodded once and walked away, disappearing into the hills. Later, Caleb had asked who the stranger was. His father's answer had been strange, cryptic. An old debt, nothing that concerns you. An old debt. Caleb sat up straighter, his heart beating faster. There had been someone else. Someone his father trusted enough to share his secret. Someone who might still be alive, still holding pieces of the puzzle. But who? And where the fire crackled and popped. The wind whispered through the pines, and somewhere in the darkness behind him, a twig snapped. Caleb's hand moved to his revolver. He did not draw. Not yet. He sat motionless by the dying fire, every muscle coiled, his eyes straining against the darkness beyond the ring of light. Another sound, closer now. The soft crunch of pine needles under a careful foot. Easy there, friend. The voice came from the shadows, low, gravelly, unthreatening. I ain't looking for trouble. A figure emerged from the tree line. An old man, thin and weathered, dressed in a buckskin coat that had seen better decades. His beard was gray and unkempt, his face creased with lines deep enough to hold rainwater. He held his hands out at his sides, palms open, showing he carried no weapon. Mind if I share your fire-cold night for these old bones? Caleb studied him. The man looked harmless enough, a drifter, maybe, or a trapper working the high country, but appearances meant little out here. Who are you? Name is Ezra. The old man did not move closer. Ezra Whitfield. Been living up in these hills for, must be 15 years now, maybe 20. Time gets slippery when you stop counting. What do you want? Like I said, warmth? Ezra tilted his head, his eyes catching the firelight. And maybe to ask why Marcus Thornton's boy is riding north in such a hurry. Caleb's hand tightened on his revolver. How do you know who I am? You look just like him. Same jaw, same eyes, same way of sitting like you are ready to spring. Ezra lowered his hand slowly. I knew your father, son, knew him a long time ago, before you were born, before a lot of things. The memory surfaced again, his father at the fence line, talking to a stranger in low voices. An old debt. You were the one, Caleb said. At the ranch, years ago, I saw you talking to my father. Might have been. Ezra's expression did not change. Marcus and I had business now and then, private business. What kind of business? The old man was quiet for a moment. Then he stepped closer to the fire, moving slowly, giving Caleb time to object. When no objection came, he lowered himself onto a fallen log and held his hands toward the flames. The kind that gets men killed, if they ain't careful. He rubbed his palms together. I heard Marcus passed. Sorry for your loss. He was a hard man, but a good one underneath it all. You heard. Word travels, even up here. Ezra glanced at the saddlebags sitting beside Caleb. You carrying his papers? Caleb did not answer. Smart. Do not trust anyone. That is what Marcus would have told you. The old man smiled, showing teeth that were yellowed but still intact. But I am guessing you are headed to Denver, looking for answers. Maybe looking for a man named Riley? Maybe. Save yourself the trip. Ezra's smile faded. Thomas Riley is dead. Has been for 3 years now. Found him in an alley behind a saloon. Throat cut ear to ear. Official story was robbery, but there was nothing stolen. His pockets were still full of coin. The words landed like a punch to the gut. Riley was dead. The one man who could have explained everything, who could have testified to the syndicate's crimes, gone. "You seem to know a mighty lot," Caleb said carefully. "I make it my business to know things, especially things that concern men like Silas Crane." Ezra leaned forward, his eyes sharp in the firelight. "You know who he works for. Do you not? The syndicate? They have been building power in this territory for 20 years, buying politicians, bribing judges, eliminating anyone who gets in their way. Your father held them off longer than anyone thought possible. But now he is gone, and they are coming for what he protected. The silver." Ezra nodded slowly. "The silver. Worth more than you can imagine. Enough to finance a railroad, build a city, buy an election. The men behind the syndicate do not just want to be rich. They want to control this entire territory. And that vein running under your land is the key to everything." Caleb's mind was racing. If Riley is dead, then who else knows, who has proof? That is the question, ain't it? Ezra reached into his coat and pulled out a small leather pouch. From it, he withdrew a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. "Your father gave me this, years ago. Told me to keep it safe, and to give it to you if anything happened to him." Caleb took the paper. It was a letter, written in his father's hand. "Ezra, if you are reading this, I am dead, and my son has come looking for answers. He will not trust you at first, that is my doing. I raised him to be suspicious. But he is a good man, better than I ever was, and he deserves the truth. You know where the other documents are hidden. You know who to contact if the syndicate makes its move. Help him, old friend. Help him do what I could not." Marcus Caleb looked up at the old man. "You have the documents. Some of them. Your father scattered them across 3 counties, gave pieces to different folks he trusted. Smart meant the syndicate could not get everything by taking out one target." Ezra's voice softened. "But it also means putting the pieces back together will not be easy. And some of the people who held them are dead now. Others have disappeared. Who else is left? A few. A lawyer in Denver, not Harmon. A different one. A rancher down in Pueblo who owed your father a debt. And me." Ezra paused. "Between us, we might have enough to expose the syndicate, but it will take time to gather everything. And time is something we do not have much of. Crane has men at the Henderson place, armed men. I know. Been watching them for 2 days." Ezra's jaw tightened. "They are waiting for something. Orders, maybe, or reinforcements. Either way, they will move soon, a week, maybe less." Caleb stood and paced beside the fire, his boots crunching on the frozen ground. Everything he had planned the trip to Denver, finding Riley, gathering proof, all of it was useless now. Riley was dead. The syndicate was too powerful, and Clara was back there alone, with armed men camped less than a mile from her door. "What do you suggest?" Ezra watched him for a long moment. "Go back. Protect your land. Protect that woman who has been helping you. I will ride to Denver and Pueblo, gather what documents I can, We will meet back in Dusty Creek in 5 days and figure out our next move. And if Crane attacks before then you hold them off as long as you can. Ezra's voice was grim. Marcus did it for 20 years. You only need to do it for 5 days. Caleb stopped pacing. 5 days. An eternity. Or a heartbeat. Depending on how things went. Why should I trust you? You should not. Ezra rose to his feet, his joints cracking in the cold air. Trust gets people killed out here. But I am the only chance you have got, and I owed your father more than I can ever repay. That will have to be enough. He reached into his coat again and pulled out a small silver coin, worn smooth with age. He pressed it into Caleb's palm. Show this to a man named Arthur Graves in Pueblo. He will know it came from me. He has document survey records, land deeds, proof that the syndicate forged signatures to steal property. It ain't enough to bring them down, but it is a start. Caleb looked at the coin. It was old Spanish, by the markings. A piece of 8, the kind pirates and traders had used a century ago. Where did this come from? Long story. One I might tell you someday, if we both live through this. Ezra stepped back from the fire. Ride hard, Caleb Thornton, and watch your back. The syndicate has eyes everywhere, even in places you would not expect. He turned and walked into the darkness, his footsteps fading into the whisper of wind through the pines. Caleb stood alone by the dying fire, the coin cold in his palm. He broke camp before dawn. The ride back was faster than the ride out downhill most of the way, and Whiskey seemed to sense the urgency, stretching his legs into a ground-eating lope that devoured the miles. By midday, Caleb had cleared the high country. By evening, he could see the lights of Dusty Creek twinkling in the valley below. He pushed on through the night. The Thornton Ranch was dark when he arrived. The windows black, the porch empty. He dismounted at the barn and led Whiskey inside, his muscles aching from the long hours in the saddle. Something was wrong. The barn door had been open when he arrived. He always closed it habit from years of living in places where an open door meant trouble. Someone had been here. Caleb drew his revolver and moved toward the house. The front door was unlocked. He pushed it open and stepped inside, his boots silent on the wooden floor. The parlor was empty, the furniture undisturbed. The kitchen was the same dishes still in the basin, coffee pot still on the stove. But in the study, a lamp was burning. Caleb raised his revolver and stepped through the doorway. Clara sat at his father's desk, her face pale in the lamplight. Across from her, in the chair Caleb had occupied just days ago, sat Silas Crane, and in Crane's hand, pointed directly at Clara's heart, was a pistol. "Put the gun down, Mr. Thornton." Crane's voice was calm, almost pleasant. He did not look at Caleb. His eyes stayed fixed on Clara, and the pistol in his hand did not waver. Slowly, please, on the desk, then step back. Caleb's finger tightened on the trigger. He could take the shot. Crane was sitting, relaxed, his attention split. One bullet to the head, and it would be over. But Clara was too close. If Crane flinched, if his fingers spasmed on the trigger, Caleb lowered his revolver and placed it on the desk. "Good." Crane smiled. "Now step back." Against the wall. Caleb moved. His boots scraped against the wooden floor. The sound was too loud in the silent room. "I apologize for the theatrical entrance," Crane said, finally turning to look at him. "But you left me little choice, riding off in the middle of the night, leaving Mrs. Dawson here all alone." not very gentlemanly. Mr. Thornton, let her go. This is between you and me. Is it? Crane tilted his head. I think Mrs. Dawson is very much involved. She has been helping your family for years. After all, bringing soup, mending fences, keeping secrets. His smile widened. Tell me, Clara, did Marcus ever tell you about the silver? Or did you figure it out on your own? Clara's face was pale, but her voice was steady. I do not know what you are talking about. Of course you do not. Crane stood, keeping the pistol trained on her. He was taller than Caleb had realized, his movements precise and controlled. That is the problem with you country folks. You think loyalty means something? You think keeping quiet will protect the people you love? He shook his head. It does not. It just makes things harder for everyone. He crossed the room to stand beside Caleb, close enough that Caleb could smell his cologne, something expensive, out of place in this dusty ranch house. I am going to make this very simple, Crane said. You have something I want. Documents, maps, proof of the silver vein that runs under this land. Your father spent 20 years hiding it, and I have spent 5 years trying to find it. Now he is dead, and you are here, and I am tired of waiting. I do not have what you are looking for. You are lying. Crane's voice hardened. I had men watching this house while you were gone. They saw you digging through your father's papers. They saw you leave with saddlebags full of documents. He gestured toward the bags, which Caleb had dropped by the door. So let us skip the part where you pretend to be ignorant, and move directly to the part where you give me what I want. Caleb said nothing. Crane sighed and turned back to Clara. Mrs. Dawson, stand up, please. Clara hesitated, then rose from the chair. Her hands were trembling slightly, though she held them clasped in front of her to hide it. Walk to the door. She did not move. Now, Mrs. Dawson. Clara walked to the doorway and stopped. Crane followed her with the pistol, then gestured toward the front of the house. Outside, both of you. The night air was cold and sharp. Stars blazed overhead, indifferent to the drama unfolding below. Crane marched them across the yard toward the barn, the pistol never wavering. Inside the barn, 2 of Crane's men waited. They were the same kind Caleb had seen in mining camps and cattle towns, hard-faced, dead-eyed, the sort who did ugly work for money and did not ask questions. One held a lantern. The other held a rifle. Mr. Thornton has decided to be difficult, Crane announced. Perhaps we can persuade him to reconsider? The man with the rifle stepped forward and drove the butt into Caleb's stomach. The blow doubled him over. Air rushed out of his lungs. He dropped to his knees in the straw-covered dirt, gasping, his vision swimming. Stop, Clara's voice, sharp with fear. Stop it. He does not have what you want. I told you. The documents are not here. Then where are they, Mas? I do not know. Marcus scattered them. Different people. Different places. Caleb only just found out about any of this. Crane crouched beside Caleb, his face level with his. The smile was gone now, replaced by something cold and patient. Is that true, Mr. Thornton? You really do not know where all the pieces are? Caleb's mouth tasted like copper. Blood. Probably. From where he had bitten his tongue. He spat onto the ground and looked up at Crane. Go to the devil! Crane's expression did not change. He stood and nodded to his men. Take him outside. The water trough. Strong hands grabbed Caleb's arms and dragged him out of the barn. He struggled, but his muscles were not working right. The blow had done something to his coordination, left him weak and unsteady. The men hauled him across the yard like a sack of grain. his boots dragging furrows in the dirt. The water trough sat beside the well, a long wooden box filled with water for the horses. Ice had formed at the edges, thin and brittle in the October cold. They forced him to his knees beside it. "Last chance," Crane said from somewhere behind him. "Tell me where the documents are, and this ends." Caleb's reflection stared up at him from the dark water, a stranger's face bruised, bleeding, pathetic. He had spent 12 years wandering the West, telling himself he was free, telling himself he had escaped his father's shadow. But here he was, on his knees in the dirt, about to drown in a horse trough while the woman he had abandoned watched. Some escape. They shoved his head under water. The cold was a fist, clenching around his skull. Water flooded his nose, his mouth. He thrashed. But the hands on his neck were too strong. His lungs burned. His vision went white at the edges. They pulled him up. He gasped, coughing, water streaming down his face. The air tasted like heaven and fire. "Where are the documents? Do not." They shoved him under again. Longer this time. The cold seeped into his bones, numbed his fingers, slowed his heart. He stopped struggling. The darkness at the edges of his vision crept closer, and part of him, the tired part, the broken part, thought it might be easier to just let go. Then hands pulled him up again. He vomited water onto the frozen ground. His whole body shook. He could not stop shaking. "This is pointless." Clara's voice, thick with tears. "He does not know. I swear to you, he does not know." Crane was silent for a moment. "Perhaps," he said finally, "or perhaps he simply needs more convincing." He stepped closer, his polished boots stopping inches from Caleb's face. "Here is what is going to happen. Mr. Thornton, I am going to leave you here tonight wet, cold, humiliated. Tomorrow morning, I am going to come back, and we are going to have another conversation. And if you still cannot tell me what I want to know, I am going to start asking Mrs. Dawson instead." He crouched down, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I have found that men who will not talk to save themselves will often talk to save someone they care about. Think about that tonight, while you are shivering in the dark." He stood and walked away. The men dropped Caleb in the mud beside the trough. He lay there, his cheek pressed against the frozen earth, too weak to move. He heard footsteps, voices, the creak of wagon wheels. Then silence. Clara's face appeared above him. "Caleb, Caleb, can you hear me?" He tried to speak, but only a croak came out. She knelt beside him, her hands on his shoulders. "We have to get you inside. You will freeze out here." Somehow she got him to his feet. He leaned on her heavily, his arm draped across her shoulders, his legs barely cooperating. They staggered toward the house, step by agonizing step. Inside, she guided him to the chair by the fireplace. The fire had burned down to embers, but she fed it quickly, adding kindling and logs until the flames roared back to life. Then she stripped off his wet coat, his shirt, wrapped him in blankets. "I am sorry," Caleb whispered. His teeth were chattering so hard he could barely form the words. "I am so sorry. Do not talk. Just warm up. I should never have come back. I brought this on you on everyone." Clara's hand stopped moving. She looked at him, her face lit by the dancing flames. "You think this started with you?" Her voice was quiet but fierce. Crane has been circling this valley for years. He would have come whether you were here or not. The only difference is now there is someone to fight back. I am not much of a fighter right now. No. She pulled the blanket tighter around his shoulders. But you will be? She sat back on her heels, her eyes searching his face. There is something I need to tell you. Something I should have said before. Caleb waited, shivering. When your father was dying in those last weeks, he told me things I did not understand at the time. Clara's voice dropped. He said there was a witness, someone who saw the syndicate forge the documents they used to steal the Henderson land. Someone who is still alive. Who? Clara's jaw tightened. He did not say a name, but he said the witness was closer than anyone realized. Someone in Dusty Creek. She paused. Someone we both know. The fire crackled. The wind moaned outside. And somewhere in the darkness, a church bell began to toll once, twice, 3 times, though it was nowhere near Sunday, and nowhere near dawn. The bell kept tolling. Clara moved to the window, her face tight with confusion. That is the church bell. Someone is ringing it. Caleb pushed himself up from the chair, his muscles screaming in protest. The blanket fell from his shoulders. His body ached everywhere, his stomach where the rifle butt had landed, his lungs from the water, his pride from everything else. What does it mean? Emergency, fire, maybe, or... She turned to look at him. Or a call to gather? The bell stopped. 7 tolls. The silence that followed was louder than the ringing had been. Stay here, Clara said. No. You can barely stand. I said no. Caleb reached for a dry shirt hanging by the fire. His fingers were clumsy, still half numb from the cold. Whatever is happening, I ain't hiding in this house while you face it alone. Clara looked like she wanted to argue. Instead, she grabbed her shawl from the hook by the door and wrapped it around her shoulders. They walked into the night together. The church stood at the center of Dusty Creek, a small white building with a steeple that had been painted and repainted so many times the wood underneath had probably forgotten its original color. Lanterns burned in the windows, and a crowd had gathered in the yard, maybe 30 people, most of them in nightclothes and coats hastily thrown over their shoulders. Caleb and Clara stopped at the edge of the crowd. What is happening? Clara asked a woman standing nearby. Do not know. Someone started ringing the bell 10 minutes ago. Preacher came out looking confused as the rest of us. At the front of the gathering, near the church steps, Caleb spotted a familiar figure, Jacob Harmon, the lawyer. Stood with his arms crossed, his white hair disheveled, his expression grim. Beside him was Sheriff Tom Delacroix, a thick-bodied man with a weathered face and eyes that never seemed to blink. And standing on the church steps, facing the crowd, was someone Caleb did not expect. Ezra Whitfield. The old man looked different than he had in the mountain camp. He had shaved, trimmed his beard, put on clothes that were worn but clean. He stood straight back despite his age, his hands clasped in front of him, waiting for the murmuring crowd to quiet. Thank you for coming, Ezra said. His voice carried easily in the cold night air. I know this is unusual. I know most of you do not know me, or remember me only as a name from a long time ago, but what I have to say cannot wait until morning. Who called this meeting? Sheriff Delacroix demanded. You do not have the authority. No, I do not. Ezra's eyes found the sheriff. But I have something more important than authority. I have the truth. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Ezra reached into his coat and pulled out a sheaf of papers. These are documents, land deeds, survey records, assay reports. Some of them are 20 years old, some are more recent. All of them prove that the syndicate, the organization that has been buying up land in this valley, has been doing so through fraud, forgery, and intimidation. Silence. I know what you are thinking, Ezra continued. You are thinking this is none of your concern. You are thinking you just want to live your lives, raise your families, stay out of trouble. I understand. I spent 15 years hiding in the mountains, thinking the same thing. He paused. But trouble has come to you whether you wanted it or not. Silas Crane and his men are camped at the Henderson place right now. Tomorrow, maybe the next day, they will make their move. And when they do, every one of you will have to choose a side. Choose a side in what someone called from the back. In a fight for this valley, Ezra's voice hardened. The syndicate does not just want the Thornton land. They want everything, your farms, your homes, your futures. The silver under these hills is worth millions, and they will do whatever it takes to get it. More murmuring. Caleb saw people exchanging glances, fear and doubt written on their faces. Then Sheriff Delacroix stepped forward. That is enough. His voice was flat, official. I do not know who you are, old man, but you cannot just ring the church bell in the middle of the night and start making accusations. If you have evidence of crimes, you bring it to my office. You do not, your office. Ezra laughed a short, bitter sound. Sheriff, do you reckon I do not know who pays your salary? Do you think these folks do not know? Delacroix's face went red. You are out of line. Am I? Ezra turned to face the crowd again. How many of you have gone to the sheriff with complaints about Crane? How many of you have reported threats, intimidation, suspicious accidents, and how many of you got any help? No one answered. But Caleb saw heads nodding, saw people looking at the sheriff with new eyes. Delacroix's hand moved toward his holster. I would not do that, Sheriff. Ezra's voice was calm. There are too many witnesses. Even you cannot explain away shooting an unarmed old man in front of half the town. The sheriff's hand stopped. His jaw worked, muscles bunching under the skin. This ain't over, he said quietly. No, it is not. Ezra turned back to the crowd. I am asking for your help. Not to fight, not yet. Just to witness. Tomorrow morning, I am taking these documents to the territorial marshal in Denver. I need folks to come with me, to testify to what they have seen and heard. The more voices we have, the harder it will be for the syndicate to silence us. And what about Crane? A man called out. What about his men at the Henderson place? That is where Mr. Thornton comes in. Ezra's eyes found Caleb in the crowd. Caleb, would you step forward, please? Every head turned. Caleb felt Clara's hand on his arm, steadying, encouraging. He walked through the crowd, his legs still unsteady, his body still aching from the beating. He climbed the church steps and stood beside Ezra. This is Marcus Thornton's son, Ezra said. Some of you remember him. Some of you probably have opinions about him. He left this valley 12 years ago. And he has been gone a long time. But he came back. And tonight, Silas Crane beat him trying to get information about the silver. A gasp from somewhere in the crowd. Caleb is going to stay here and protect his land. Ezra continued. But he cannot do it alone. He needs folks who are willing to stand with him, not to fight, but to witness, to be present. Crane's power comes from operating in the shadows. If enough of us stand in the light, He cannot touch us. Silence. Caleb looked out at the faces before him, farmers and shopkeepers, wives and children, people who had known his father, people who had watched him grow up. They were afraid. He could see it in their eyes, in the way they held themselves, and he could not blame them. He opened his mouth to speak and stopped, because pushing through the crowd began, moving toward the church steps with grim determination, was someone he had not expected to see. Ben Harlow. Harlow was one of Crane's men. Caleb had seen him at the barn earlier standing beside the man with the rifle, watching with those dead eyes while they dragged Caleb toward the water trough. But something was different now. Harlow's face was pale, his movements jerky, and there was something in his eyes that had not been there before. Something that looked almost like shame. He climbed the steps and stood beside Caleb, facing the crowd. "My name is Ben Harlow," he said. His voice was rough, unsteady. "I work for Silas Crane. I have done things I ain't proud of, things that keep me awake at night." The crowd stirred. Sheriff Delacroix took a step forward, but Harlow kept talking. 3 years ago, in Denver. I was there when Thomas Riley was killed. I did not hold the knife, but I watched. And I did nothing." His voice cracked. "Riley was a good man. He had a wife, children, and we killed him because he knew too much." A woman in the crowd began to cry. "I ain't asking for forgiveness," Harlow continued. "I do not deserve it. But I am tired of lying, tired of hurting people, tired of being afraid." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small leather notebook. "This is a record of every crime the syndicate has committed in this territory over the past 5 years. Names, dates, amounts. I kept it because I thought someday I might need leverage. But now..." He held it out to Ezra. "Now I just want it to be over." Ezra took the notebook. His weathered face showed no judgment, no triumph, only a kind of weary understanding. "Thank you, Mr. Harlow." Harlow nodded once. Then he turned and walked down the steps, through the silent crowd, and disappeared into the darkness. The rest of the night passed in a blur. People came forward slowly at first, then in greater numbers. Some offered to ride with Ezra to Denver. Others agreed to stay and keep watch at the Thornton Ranch. By the time the sky began to lighten in the east, a plan had taken shape. Caleb stood on the church steps, watching the crowd disperse. Clara appeared beside him, her shawl pulled tight against the morning chill. "How do you feel?" "Like I have been beaten, half drowned, and forced to give a speech." He managed a weak smile. "So, better than expected." Clara did not smile back. "Crane will know about this by now. His men were probably watching. I know. He will come for you. Today. Maybe. Tomorrow, at the latest." "I know." She was quiet for a moment. Then she reached out and took his hand. "I should have told you before. About the witness your father mentioned." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I think I know who it is." Caleb turned to look at her. "Who?" Clara's eyes were fixed on something across the street. Caleb followed her gaze. Jacob Harmon stood in the doorway of his law office, watching them. His face was unreadable. "Your father trusted him with everything," Clara said slowly. "The documents, the secrets, the map. But think about it, Caleb. Harmon has been the lawyer for half the families in this valley. He handled the Henderson sale, the Foster sale. He knew about every transaction before it happened. The pieces clicked into place. He was working both sides. Maybe. Or maybe he was just surviving, the way everyone else was." Clara's hand tightened on his. But your father said the witness was someone close, someone who saw the forgeries happen. And Harmon was there. Caleb, he was always there. Across the street, Harmon met Caleb's eyes. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then the old lawyer turned and walked inside, closing the door behind him. Caleb crossed the street alone. The morning sun was just breaking over the mountains, painting the storefronts in shades of gold and amber. Dusty Creek was waking up a shopkeeper sweeping his porch, a dog trotting down the middle of the road, the smell of coffee drifting from the boarding house. An ordinary morning in an ordinary town. Except for everything that had happened in the night. He pushed open the door to Harmon's office. The lawyer sat behind his desk. Exactly where Caleb had found him on that first day. His hands were folded on the blotter. His spectacles perched on his nose. He did not look surprised. "Close the door, please." Caleb did. The office was quiet. Dust motes floated in the slant of light through the window. The shelves of leather-bound books seemed to press in from all sides. Witnesses to decades of secrets. "I wondered when you would come," Harmon said. "I figured it would be sooner. Frankly, your father was quicker to suspicion. My father trusted you." "Yes, he did." Harmon removed his spectacles and set them on the desk. Without them, his eyes looked older, more tired. "That was his mistake. One of many." Caleb remained standing. "You were working for the syndicate. Working for them. Working against them. Working for myself." Harmon shrugged. "The lines blur after a while. When you have spent 40 years in a town like this, watching families rise and fall, watching good men broken by circumstance, you learn that survival requires flexibility." "Flexibility?" Caleb's voice was flat. "Is that what you call it? Helping Crane steal land from folks who trusted you." "I helped some, I protected others." Harmon met his gaze. "Your father. For instance, do you reckon he survived 20 years against the syndicate through stubbornness? Alone, I fed him information. I warned him when they were planning moves against him. I delayed paperwork. Lost documents, found legal technicalities that bought him time. And in exchange, I stayed alive, and so did he longer than he should have, all things considered." Harmon leaned back in his chair. "The syndicate is not a group of men you can fight, Caleb. They are an idea, a system. You cut off one head, 2 more grow back. I learned that lesson a long time ago, when I was young and foolish enough to think I could make a difference." "So you gave up?" "I adapted." The word was sharp. "There is a difference." Caleb walked to the window and looked out at the street. Clara was still standing by the church, talking to a group of townspeople. Even from here, he could see the determination in her posture. "My father's letter mentioned a witness," he said without turning around. "Someone who saw the syndicate forge documents. Someone in Dusty Creek." Harmon was silent. "It was you. Was it not you watched them do it? You have proof." "I have records, notes, observations." Harmon's voice was careful. "Nothing that would stand up in a territorial court, but enough to point investigators in the right direction, enough to make certain people mighty uncomfortable." Caleb turned. "Rian, then why have you not used them?" "Because I am an old man who wants to die in his bed." Harmon's composure cracked slightly. Because the last person who tried to expose the syndicate, a journalist in Denver, 5 years ago, was found at the bottom of Cherry Creek with his throat cut. Because I have a daughter in San Francisco and grandchildren I have never met. And I would like to live long enough to change that. So you do nothing. I survive. Harmon stood, his chair scraping against the wooden floor. That may not seem like much to you, with your youth and your righteous anger. But when you have watched as many friends die as I have, when you have buried as many people you failed to protect, survival starts to feel like an accomplishment. They stood facing each other across the desk. The silence stretched. Then Harmon opened a drawer and pulled out a thick envelope, yellowed with age. This is everything I have. 20 years of notes, observations, dates, and names. Copies of forged documents. A list of officials who have taken bribes. He held it out. I was going to burn it after your father died. I thought the fight was over. But then you came back, and that old man started ringing church bells, and folks started standing up, and I thought... You thought what? Harmon's hand trembled slightly. I thought maybe I was tired of surviving. Maybe I was ready to do something else. Caleb took the envelope. It was heavier than he expected. By midday, the plan was set. Ezra would ride for Denver with 5 witnesses, including Ben Harlow. They carried Harmon's documents, the notebook, and the evidence Caleb had gathered from his father's papers. If they rode hard, they could reach the territorial marshal in 3 days. Meanwhile, Caleb and a group of townspeople would hold the Thornton Ranch. Not to fight Ezra had been clear about that, but to witness, to be present, to make sure that whatever Crane did, he did it in front of people who would remember. The group gathered at the ranch that afternoon. 15 people in total: farmers, shopkeepers, a school teacher, the preacher's wife. They brought food, blankets, rifles. They set up watch posts along the fence line and built fires in the yard. Clara was everywhere, organizing supplies, assigning tasks, keeping spirits up. She moved through the chaos with the ease of someone who had spent years managing a ranch alone. Caleb watched her from the porch. She is something, ain't she? He turned. Old man Patterson stood beside him, leaning on a walking stick. His face was weathered and kind, his eyes sharp despite his age. Yes, Caleb said. She is. I remember when you two were young. Everyone thought you would marry. Then you left, and she married Matthew. And life went on the way it does. Patterson shook his head. Strange how things work out. Strange. Patterson studied him. You planning to leave again after all this is over? Caleb did not answer right away. He looked out at the land, his land now, though it still did not feel like his. The pastures rolling away toward the mountains, the barn his grandfather had built, the house where he had been born. No, he said finally, I ain't leaving. Patterson nodded, as if this confirmed something he had already suspected. Good. This valley needs folks willing to stay and fight for it. Been too many who ran? He patted Caleb's shoulder with a gnarled hand. Your father would be proud. The old man walked away, leaving Caleb alone with his thoughts. Crane came at dusk. They saw the dust first, a cloud rising from the road, backlit by the setting sun. Then the shapes emerged: horses, wagons, men on foot, maybe 20 in all, armed with rifles and pistols. Caleb stood at the gate with Clara beside him. Behind them, the townspeople formed a line along the fence, their faces set with fear and determination. The convoy stopped 50 yards from the gate. Crane dismounted and walked forward alone. His suit was dusty, his hair disheveled. He looked like a man who had not slept. "Mr. Thornton?" His voice carried in the still evening air. "This is quite the gathering. Mr. Crane." "I see you have been busy." Crane's eyes swept the line of witnesses. Farmers, shopkeepers, women. His lip curled. "Do you really think this rabble can stop me?" "I reckon they can watch." Caleb kept his voice steady. "I think they can remember. And I think that when the territorial marshal arrives with federal deputies, they can testify to whatever happens here tonight." Something flickered in Crane's eyes. The marshal? Ezra Whitfield left this morning with evidence of every crime the syndicate has committed in this territory. Documents, witnesses, a full confession from one of your own men. Caleb paused. "Ben Harlow sends his regards." Crane's face went pale. "You are bluffing." "Am I?" Caleb reached into his coat and pulled out a single sheet of paper, a copy of one of Harmon's documents, bearing the syndicate's forged signature. "This is just a taste. There is more, much more. Enough to put you and your employers in prison for the rest of your lives." Crane stared at the paper. His jaw worked. Behind him, his men shifted uneasily, exchanging glances. "This ain't over," Crane said quietly. "No, it is not." Caleb stepped closer. "But here is what is going to happen. You are going to take your men and leave this valley. Tonight, and you are never going to come back. Because if you do, if you touch anyone here, if you threaten anyone here, that evidence goes to every newspaper between here and Washington. The syndicate will be finished. And you will be the man who destroyed it." Silence. Crane's hand moved toward his holster. "I would not do that," Clara said. She had produced a rifle from somewhere, and it was pointed directly at Crane's chest. "There are 15 witnesses here. Mr. Crane, even your men cannot shoot all of us before someone talks." Crane looked at her, then at the line of townspeople, then at his own men, who were slowly backing away, their faces uncertain. He lowered his hand. "This ain't over," he said again, but his voice had lost its edge. He turned and walked back to his horse, mounted, and rode away without looking back. His men followed. The dust settled, and the valley was quiet. 1 month later, Caleb stood on the porch of the Thornton house, watching the sun set over the mountains. The air was cold now, real cold, the kind that promised snow before long. The cattle had been moved to the lower pastures, the hay stored in the barn, the firewood stacked high beside the door. Winter was coming, but they were ready. Clara came out and stood beside him. She was wearing a blue dress, the same one she had worn that night at her kitchen table, a lifetime ago. Her hair was loose around her shoulders. "The preacher confirmed Sunday," she said. Caleb nodded. "Good. Are you nervous? Should I be?" She smiled a real smile, the kind he had not seen from her in weeks. "Probably. I am told weddings are mighty terrifying." He reached out and took her hand. Her fingers were warm against his. "I spoke with Ezra this morning," he said. "Crane has fled the territory. The syndicate is in disarray. The territorial marshal is investigating, and there are rumors of federal involvement, so it is over, the worst of it." He paused. "There will be more battles. There always are. But for now, we have peace." They stood together in silence. watching the colors fade from the sky. The first stars appeared, one by one. "Your father would have liked this," Clara said quietly. "Seeing you here, seeing you stay." Caleb thought about the letters in his father's desk, the words that had never been spoken, the love that had never been expressed. He thought about his mother's journal, and Ezra's courage, and Harmon's redemption. He thought about all the broken people who had somehow found their way towards something whole. "I know," he said. Clara leaned her head against his shoulder. Below them, a lamp flickered on in the window, warm and golden against the gathering dark. The door stood open. Home. There is a certain quiet that settles after a story like this one. A heaviness in the chest that is not quite sadness, not quite relief. Perhaps it is something in between, the tender ache of recognizing something familiar. Many of us have known what it means to leave a place or a person, believing we were doing the right thing. Many of us have carried words we never said, letters we never sent, love we never spoke aloud until it was almost too late. And some of us have been lucky enough to find our way back, not to the same place, but to a new beginning built on the ruins of what we thought was lost. It is all right if this story stays with you a while. It does not need to be resolved or fully understood. Some things are simply meant to be felt. Then gently set down like a book we have finished reading on a quiet evening. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening.